Hello, and thank you for logging in today. I'm Dr. Luke Evnin. I'm a scleroderma patient, and I'm the chairman of the Scleroderma Research Foundation, which, hopefully, as you know, is America's leading nonprofit investor in research to find improved therapies and a cure. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Bob Saget from his office in LA. This webinar, the fifth in our series, promises to be really quite different from those we've hosted in the past, which is really focused on researchers and clinicians from the scleroderma clinical and research community. Now, I can't promise that everything today's guest says will be entirely, well, let's just say, on point. But I can say that this is a wholly unscripted call, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some of Bob's insights and his passion, as well as my own, and what we're trying to do to help the scleroderma patient community. Our webinar will focus on what's being done to find a cure, the research that's taking place, celebrity fundraisers, volunteer events, and hopefully some personal insights as well. As we have in the past, I would really like to emphasize that obviously this webinar is being offered at no cost to you. We never charge a membership fee, and we receive no government funding. So please, do consider making a donation after our time together. Philanthropic support is the only way that Scleroderma Research Foundation is able to carry out its mission, and we rely on the generous support of our benefactors. We are scheduled for about an hour, and within that period, we will include a question and answer session. Questions can be asked using the chat box in the conference window, and we will be trying to take questions and thoughts along the way. Remember, our webinars are for general information only, and no information provided is to be considered personalized medical advice. As I started, we are delighted to be able to bring to you Bob Saget and his strong passion for helping patients with scleroderma. Bob is probably best known by many of us as the single dad, Danny Tanner, from the hit television show Full House. He's also well remembered as host of America's Funniest Home Videos. Bob is equally comfortable embracing his dark side, performing on stage as he is directing and writing for TV. As some of you know, he directed MGM's cult favorite film, Dirty Work, as well as directed and produced the emotionally powerful ABC for-television movie, For Hope, which starred SRF board member Dana Delaney and was roughly based on Bob's sister's struggle with scleroderma. On his personal resume, Bob has starred in the critically acclaimed Paul White's off-Broadway play, Privilege, and the on-Broadway Tony Award-winning play, The Drowsy Chaperone. Bob has hosted, starred in, appeared, produced, and lent his considerable talents to some of the most popular shows on television, including How I Met Your Mother, HBO's Entourage, the NBC quiz show 1 vs. 100, Law and Order, and many, many more. His film credits are also numerous, including writing, directing, and producing the hilarious Farce of the Penguins. Bob currently produces the Foundation's flagship fundraiser, Cool Comedy Hot Cuisine, and has done so for many, many years, and we owe him a deep debt of gratitude for all the work and energy he's put into that. Bob is currently on a new tour playing to sold-out audiences in theaters and universities across North America while he's preparing to shoot his next stand-up TV special later this year. Just to provide a bit of color on my own background, it's obviously really different from Bob's. Maybe we're the perfect odd couple to help cure scleroderma. I received my PhD in biochemistry from the University of California, San Francisco, and graduated from Princeton University prior to that, also with a degree in molecular biology. My day job, if you will, is as a venture capital investor. I founded one of the largest biotech-oriented venture capital firms that's currently investing in the space today. Now, Bob rarely takes me up on my invitations to him to hang out with all my scientist buddies, but I love spending time with Bob and his celebrity pals, and we certainly share an undying passion, if you will, for curing our patients who have been affected by scleroderma. It's my pleasure to introduce a very passionate and gifted man. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Luke. Your friendship and your dedication and your passion means a great deal to me personally, as well as what we're all trying to accomplish here.
Maybe we should just start a little bit from the beginning and talk a bit about how you met the Scleroderma Research Foundation founder, Sharon, and talk a bit about sort of your journey into scleroderma, which I think is really a remarkable story in and of itself.
It was interesting. I guess about 25 years ago, I was just cold called by this wonderful person that I'd never met, Sharon, who was the founder of the Scleroderma Research Foundation, of which you, Luke, are the CEO and chairman of it now, which is an amazing thing how far it's come since then. And her passion was kind of unbelievable. She just cold called and said, would you like to be a comedian? Because we do these benefits called Cool Comedy, Hot Cuisine. We had Robin Williams, she said, do the very first one. Our dear friend, Susan Feniger, board member and owner of the Border Grill restaurants, she asked Robin to do it one night. Robin was having dinner in her restaurant. It used to be City, and now it's Street out in Hollywood. And Robin performed, and then a year later she had a bunch of comedians, Richard Belzer and some others, and then a year later asked me to do it. I didn't know her, and I said I would be honored. And at that time it was Rosie O'Donnell, Ellen DeGeneres, and a couple other people. And after meeting Sharon, a person, mother of three, great person, I immediately hit it off with her. And the disease had affected her in her internal organs, and she had systemic scleroderma and 20 years of unfortunate decay from the disease years later. But upon being asked to do it, I did the benefit. Lovely people, enjoyed being there, wanted to do it every year after that. Continued to do it, and just a few years later, my sister Gay in Philadelphia, a teacher up in Bucks County, was stricken with a disease. We didn't know what. They tried to tag it with all different kinds of things, Epstein-Barr, depression, lupus, all different diagnoses, all incorrect. And then she was finally diagnosed with scleroderma, and my parents brought her out here, and she had to live with my parents as a 44-year-old woman, and got treatment. And unfortunately, the treatment wasn't the cutting edge that we are starting to be able to do, and people are able to acquire with this disease, which I'll let you talk in a moment, because you know so much more than I do, Luke, about different ways that people are affected. And she came to the benefit one year, Cool Comedy Hot Cuisine, at the Lowe's Hotel in Santa Monica. And the following year she came to it again, but she was declining quickly. And then 1 year later she lost her life to the disease due to pulmonary hypertension, and her body just couldn't withstand it. It was a really quick progression of the disease. And also, I don't think the medical treatments were of the sort that I'm aware of now from being fortunate enough to be a board member. And then 2 years after that, I decided to do something in my way and publicly, because it was such a frustrating and sad loss. And I made this movie for ABC television called For Hope, starring our board member Dana Delaney, who did an eloquent job portraying a story kind of seriously based, but also loosely based on our family, with Harold Gould and Polly Bergen and Henry Cherney and Chris Demetrol and Tracy Nelson, and it was a sad portrayal, and yet hopefully a positive portrayal, so this disease can be eradicated for so many people. And I've, in the past 10 years, been a board member, very proud board member of the Scleroderma Research Foundation, And as Luke was saying in the intro, we have gotten a very interesting closeness as friends, and coming from two different mindsets are all on our entire board is on a very passionate, driven, and fulfilling quest to fund the research that is, we feel, pioneering and hopefully changing the future. Luke, I have a question for you because it's been a few years. We've been doing so many different things. What do you think is the difference about scleroderma research today as it was from 3 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's, and I like to think about research in really a couple of different buckets because there's really different elements to it. There's a whole element, I think, now to the sophistication in, first of all, clinical diagnosis, and we are contributing on that dimension. There's a whole piece to another element that we're contributing to, which is really translational research, which is to take advantage of some of the things we think are happening in the disease and to start to investigate whether or not currently available therapeutics or experimental therapeutics can work, and then which we call translational research. And then there's a whole element which is really the core of the research program at the SRF, which is investigating what's really driving the disease from a basically biological mechanism standpoint. And the whole point of that is if we can figure out what's really, quote unquote, gone wrong, gone haywire, if you will, we can devise basically better therapeutic solutions. So, even in the last 3 years, we have made really dramatic progress on all three fronts, and I'm really delighted to say that. And maybe for the patients who are on the phone, I think maybe the most easily grasped and most tangible is the progress made on the first two that I mentioned, the stuff that's already in the clinic, agents that are being progressed forward, or basically therapies that are being progressed forward, and things that are being tested preliminarily in man or the final stages of animal testing prior to being going into man. So I'm incredibly confident that over the next few years, let's say certainly in the next 3 to 5, there will be a whole range of options available for patients that weren't available just a few years ago. And I'm really particularly excited about the role that the SRF has played in, first of all, raising awareness among companies, and secondly, fundamentally contributing to how they think about the disease and some of the tools they're able to use to convince themselves that their therapies are working. And I think that's a pretty different place than where we were just a short time ago. So I'm very excited about that.
And I would also think it is very inspiring, all of the people that are on this call right now and online right now. We should let them know, I guess, where the funding goes, where our research centers are, and how could this affect them directly? What is the impact on the individuals as they are touched by it themselves or their loved ones?
Right. So we basically do try to, we have about $1 million a year, which I guess it's fair to say, struggle mightily to raise on an annual basis. And we should come back and talk a bit about all that goes into that, Bob, because you play such an instrumental role, and it's really what consumes a huge percentage of all of our energy. But we then basically go through an allocation process guided by our scientific advisory board, and we're very fortunate to have now long-standing commitments from some of the really the premier scientists in America, folks who run institutes at the NIH, folks who are research leaders and are editors of the leading scientific journals, and so they see all the science and participate at the highest levels in basically research funding allocation decisions, really at a national and even an international scale, and they're able to bring that perspective down a couple orders of magnitude to the resources that we have available to us. But nonetheless, it's the rigor of their thought process that really helps us hopefully make the very best decisions we can make with our funding to fund the different buckets, the translational research and in particular the basic research being the two prominent buckets, and then also the third bucket being the clinical centers of excellence like Johns Hopkins and Stanford, which are the two primary beneficiaries at the moment of that funding, where we're really trying to advance very directly clinical care. And which is really sort of about taking the tools that are currently available and optimizing those, so that patients don't end up with the experience that Gay had, whatever that is now 20 years ago, but as you alluded to, end up with a much, much, much different experience today than that.
Right. There's also I see from someone that we're talking to right now, Dawn Pridemore is on this call, and she says she has scleroderma, and she feels she gets thrown from physician to physician, and now she's got, abnormal health care and slight elevations. They say not PAH at this time, which I'm not familiar with, but this year she has another heart catheter and all of these complications that people get to. The answer she gets all the time is you have to wait to get more progress. And then she completes it by asking, why is stem cell not available in the U.S.? And what is your feeling, Luke, about the stem cell when it comes to this issue?
So those are all good questions, and obviously we really can't provide and have no intention of providing individual medical advice. But I guess sort of just the insight on PAH, and PAH stands for pulmonary arterial hypertension, which is a complication in the lungs that unfortunately is a pretty debilitating complication of the disease, particularly afflicts patients who have had limited disease for a number of years. So that's sort of unfortunately a common complication for those unlucky limited disease patients. And the reason why they're asking her to have another heart cath, I presume, is that there is a threshold of impairment which puts you into the clinical category of having clinical hypertension as opposed to in the watch and wait category. Because, like all medication and all therapy, there is a risk-benefit, and I presume that's what her clinicians are trying to evaluate for her. With respect to sort of switching, this is really switching gears, and to talk a bit about stem cell transplant. And just to sort of back up, I think what most people are talking about, at least in the scleroderma field, when they're talking about stem cell transplant, is really the stem cell rescue portion of high-dose immunotherapy. So it's a somewhat of a blunderbuss approach, and unfortunately this is what's available to us still today, which is to say we have a bad autoimmune disease. We don't exactly know, and this is sort of where the research hopefully will ultimately come in, but we don't really know what's wrong with you. We're going to go in and basically give you, a fairly potent cocktail which is going to knock out most of the cells in your immune system.
And when you say cocktail, Luke, we're not talking a mixed drink. We're talking a blend of
Sorry, when I say cocktail, yes, I mean it's a highly engineered, extremely specific mixture of chemotherapy and radiation.
Because I go right to an actual cocktail.
Yes, I know. Well, you probably are going to need one after the conversation. But sorry, I don't mean to use the vernacular.
No, I'm just clarifying,
that's exactly
and I enjoy it.
Thanks for bringing me back here. So so that is administered over an extremely precise schedule of visits, and it's extremely calculated about how much radiation safe, and actually those protocols are still evolving. I'll talk a little bit about what the SRF is doing on that dimension in a second. But at the end of that, you end up in a profoundly immunosuppressed state. And in order to protect you, the patient, they basically give you back some of your own stem cells, which they pulled out of you before they basically put all the nasty stuff in you to kill the remaining residual cells. So if they didn't give you back, if they didn't do an autologous stem cell rescue, you are so profoundly immunosuppressed that it's extremely dangerous, and there is, unfortunately, very high mortality if they don't rescue you. So the stem cell, quote-unquote, piece of that is really a way to protect the patients in this period immediately after the process to kill off all the bad cells, and you're still basically closely watched during the hospital for a piece of that, and closely watched thereafter. But the idea is that after recovery of hopefully just your good immune system, the scleroderma driving cells are gone, and you can be put into a profound and hopefully even durable remission post this fairly dramatic treatment. There have been numerous stories, I'd say anecdotes of success. This has been rolled up into both a European trial, which is called ASTIS, and then there was another trial. There was a parallel trial done in the U.S. called abbreviated SCOT, S-C-O-T. Those results have not been formally presented, although we have had we talked to the investigators, and we have some idea about how those studies went. I think they're certainly promising enough for us to continue pursuing the therapy. I don't think we feel like we have sort of the magic bullet yet, as unfortunately. So there's still some more work to be done, but we think it's promising, and for certain patients, it's clearly something that they should consider.
And to consider it, Luke, they would talk to their rheumatologist, or would they go to a research center?
That's a good question, and I'm going to go on and on. So this is for patients who I think either have profound disease or have rapidly progressive disease. This would be an option for them to consider. It's probably not something that a community rheumatologist can make a decision on, but if they get agreement with their community rheumatologist that the disease is progressing quickly, then they need to get referred to sort of a specialty center who can help them make good decisions about this kind of care.
Now we are friends with many research centers and fund several, and one of the people I've become close with is Dr. Fred Wigley at Johns Hopkins. Would Dr. Wigley or other centers that we fund be people that could help someone decide if that would be an option for them?
Right, and there are, as you point out, Bob, there are a number of specialty centers. We've gotten particularly fond of Fred, and we funded a lot of the development of that center of excellence. And Dr. Wigley's, who hosted a webinar not long ago for our audience, I think is maybe if not certainly one of the leading scleroderma clinicians in the U.S. today. And there's a handful of other centers across the U.S. who would all be, I think, excellent places to help patients make the decision and portray the range of options that would be available. And it was probably hard to do on this telephone call is to make specific recommendations.
Of course. And what do you think, Luke, and this is, I'm asking you these questions, and I don't even know all the answers because it changes, our advancements change so quickly. What is our next step for scleroderma research, and how would it affect the many people? And we've got a lot of people writing in now. Just a sidebar, a lady, Andrea in Oakland, has written a children's book that she's donating all the proceeds to the Scleroderma Research Foundation, and there's a couple other people that have written books and are trying to help. And I'm reading now a bunch of people that are diagnosed with it. What is the next step?
For raising money?
For dealing with their disease, and how can they? Well, I definitely want to talk about raising money. Actually, since you brought that up, that would actually be a great thing. The people that are out there right now that would like to help the cause, how could they, in their own communities, and how could they get involved with us or with their own private research raising?
Yeah, I mean, we have tried to put together a set of tools which we call our cure team, and basically enable. We've got a package which the folks in the Scleroderma Research Foundation office, Amy Hewitt and Charles Spalding, can help motivated volunteers to optimize for their individual needs, to basically do locally driven fundraisers, and that's a critical element to ultimately putting together the scale of funds that we need every year. We obviously do our best to reach out beyond the scleroderma community and their families with our Cool Comedy Hot Cuisine fundraisers, which really reaches a broad philanthropic community, and we'll continue to do that, of course. But and if people can help support those events, in the cities where we host them, San Francisco, LA, and New York, obviously we'd love to have people come, buy tables, bring their friends. All that, of course, is stuff that we will continue to do.
And we are doing our next one October 22nd at Caroline's in Manhattan, right in Times Square, and we have some wonderful talent. Seth Meyers is already confirmed, and a couple other comedian friends. And it's such it can be such a horrible disease and crippling disease. It's those moments of the flip side that shed some light and some humor to it, and so many of the people that attend these events are affected directly by it, either themselves, patients, or family members. We've got some wonderful board members in New York, including Jeff Mace and Karen Zucker, who put all their passion and heart into the events along with us. And these cure advocate people, that cure care people, they do events in different cities. So they would, if they wanted to do an event, whether it be a walk or a run or any kind of event, they could contact the foundation, right? Or Amy Hewitt or Charles Spalding.
Exactly, right. Our Cure crew, we have the tools available. We have some online, the set of tools, which, probably I won't go through sort of chapter and verse here, but there's some online tools which, maybe if more familiar to others than even me, that we have available, and just either Charles or Amy can really talk prospective volunteers, if you will, through the process of what it takes, brainstorm with them about ways to organize a campaign, whether it's literally things as simple as I'm going to do a half marathon. Will you please support me? Through to something slightly more elaborate, like organizing a golf tournament or a golf outing with corporate sponsorships on a hole-by-hole basis and that sort of stuff. So there's a whole range of things that are potentially available that frankly can all contribute from the hundreds to thousands to even hundreds of thousands of dollars to on an annual basis, and all of it makes a difference.
And Luke, I was going off road a little bit, and as I do, I didn't really let you finish what's the next step, because I'm seeing comments from a lot of people. And what is the next step for the research that can directly help these people? We're hearing from people from Australia and different people that are affected, and they're a bit lost on this, and they're not getting quite the information or the care that they want. What is in the future that you're aware of right now?
Yeah, it's I think what patients who have the disease today want to know is what's being what are the things that they could actually try, kind of quote unquote, tomorrow, or what should they be pushing their doctor on right now. And so I guess to maybe parse that a little bit, and then I'm happy to go into sort of the more research aspects, which is really the things that the SRF, our foundation, is most focused on, which is sort of the future of scleroderma care. But maybe just on the front. So if you've got if you've got bad scleroderma today, what do you quote unquote do? Particularly if you think your doctor isn't, has sort of run out of ideas for you. First of all, I think there are aggressive therapies like this high-dose immunotherapy followed by stem cell rescue, which I've recently just kind of maybe in too deep a dive sort of walked patients through. I think that's certainly a therapy that is worth considering, and has certainly for some patients seems to really generate a fairly dramatic result. There are, I think what's really interesting is now there are a number of clinical trials being run in scleroderma patients with promising, basically novel drugs. And there is a connection right on the Scleroderma website, which takes patients to the clinicaltrials.gov site, which would list all of the clinical trials that are currently enrolling scleroderma patients. For better or for worse, most of those trials are really focused on patients who've got early active disease, and the majority of those are focused on patients with early active diffuse disease, which is, I can sort of go into that a little bit more, but that's sort of one of the subsets of scleroderma.
Is diffuse more external?
Yeah, that for those who have the disease, they probably know what I'm talking about. But just for everybody's sake, the diffuse disease tends to be the patients who get kind of the more visually pronounced puffiness in their extremities, particularly their sort of arms and below the elbow and their legs, and where you particularly see some of the facial changes as well. So it's sort of, and you often get some of the fibrosis in your hands in particular. So that's quote unquote the diffuse disease. There's obviously a number of other symptoms more related to the internal organs. So I'm talking about sort of the most visibly available symptoms. And
Luke, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what would you suggest? Because a lot of people are just getting diagnosed like right now, and they might be all over the world. What should their immediate course of action, in your opinion, be? If they just get diagnosed with it, what exactly
and it really,
can they do?
So Bob, it really depends. Obviously, I think it's super important for them to get appropriately typed, and appropriately classified in terms of where are they in their disease and how rapidly are they progressing. And it is important for that to for them to get into, I think, probably a specialty center to evaluate that, because for some patients, particularly we talked about a patient who was being evaluated for pulmonary arterial hypertension. I think that's really best done in centers that, frankly, routinely do those procedures for pulmonary hypertension, and, oh, by the way, have an associated scleroderma physician who really is expert at understanding and putting those results into the context of scleroderma.
One of the things I was most frustrated about with my sister and with many, many people that I meet, because they know my connection perhaps to the disease, what is it? Is it an autoimmune disease? I hear you get so many different doctors' opinions, and I know it manifests itself in many different ways. What can a patient do to make sure they're not being misinformed?
Yes, it's really frustrating. Still, and super frustrating for us here, because we hear all the time about patients who either getting misdiagnosed or remain undiagnosed for years and years, and that was certainly my own journey as well.
How long have you been diagnosed, Luke?
So I was diagnosed about 12 years ago. And it took me 5 years from, I'd say, the onset of my first non-Raynaud's symptoms, which is kind of how it's classically defined as the break point.
And that's in the fingertips. Raynaud's mostly the extremities?
Yeah, for Raynaud's, the reason why people say the first non-Raynaud's symptoms is it's often true that there's for better or for worse, there's this prodromal phase for some patients where they have Raynaud's but no other symptoms, and then that's because that's maybe the first, for many patients, that's the first symptom. But if you have just Raynaud's, that's not a particularly a worrisome condition, although it can obviously affect your quality of life if you have what's called primary Raynaud's. But if you've got secondary Raynaud's, meaning you've got Raynaud's secondary to scleroderma, then all sorts of then the bad things can happen, like ulceration and so forth, and calcinosis, or if you've got diffuse disease, of course, fibrosis and some other things. So, and so it's when you start to get some of the other symptoms that, frankly, the medical community should be able to pick that up, particularly, associated with the fact that the vast majority of patients are anti-nuclear antibody positive. So that's something that's readily available by looking in your blood. Simple blood test reveals your ANA status. So, I mean, I would say that for doctors who are looking for it, it's really not that hard to figure out that someone's got scleroderma. Unfortunately, although we're working very hard in awareness, there's still many patients who don't get diagnosed early on.
I'm looking, and there's so many people, family members are online right now, and including a former board member of ours, because we unfortunately lost him, Ron Carminati, a wonderful man. His daughter is online. And one of the things everybody seems to be also saying on here, besides they were diagnosed and they're trying to live with it and what can they do, the family support is what a lot of people are bringing up and concerned about their daughters and their sons. But what can we do for these people? It's an impossible question to answer, but everybody's hoping for a cure. Everybody's praying for that. Or how do you handle that question, being a patient yourself, being the chairman of the Scleroderma Research Foundation, and you get posed that question? Where are we in terms of that word? Would we be able to have a cure?
Right, and that is why still the vast majority of our dollars are going to trying to break down our understanding of what really goes wrong in scleroderma. A variety of the basically the agents that are being tested are really focused on some of the symptoms in scleroderma, and those are absolutely critical to address. If we can make patients more comfortable, if we can improve their quality of life, that's all super important. Unfortunately, none of those kinds of things are not going to lead to durable remissions or cures. I think in order for us to do that, we've really got to understand what goes wrong in the patients, or at least most of the patients, and then come up with therapies that address what goes wrong, either correct it or prevent it from going wrong, or some combination. And so, frankly, as you know, most of our research dollars, let's say more than half, really go to what we think are the most promising avenues of research that are really investigating the mechanism of the disease, what we think is going wrong. And that, unfortunately, the tools that we have available to us are stuff like working with cells in the lab, working with animal models of the disease, and also obviously looking in patient samples, of course, to see what we can learn. So it's that combination of tools which have gotten vastly more sophisticated over the last couple of years that we're using to basically get back to the underlying mechanisms.
And patients that are listening now, Luke, if they wanted to be part of the clinical trials, I know that's a tie-in on our website, that would mean that they would go under some of the new cocktails in medications that could possibly help them.
Right. We should just refer patients back to that clinical trial site, and I'm happy to do that. And sort of maybe we should devote a future webinar to sort of some of the different clinical trials. But I think it's a little hard to do that comprehensively. And Bob, I'm just a little mindful. I'd love to have, while we have you for a few more minutes today, just because I'm so impressed with, and have been over the last now 13, 14 years that I've been involved with the foundation, your passion. I'd love for the patient community to understand, all the things and have at least even a slight appreciation for everything that you've put into the foundation. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just have, for you to talk a little bit about cool comedy, and how you've involved some of your friends, and all the way from John Mayer to Counting Crows and so forth, and just talk about what it takes you to put on a cool comedy, which is, for better or for worse, still the vast majority of the funds that our foundation raises every year.
It's an honor to be part of it, and I'm always touched by how many comedians come through for me, because the model was created by Sharon Monsky that, laughter is the best medicine, and I always say that that's not true. It's Percocet. Thanks, Luke. You're the only person I can hear laughing. And other people I understand if not. But we put in a reverence into the events because it is such a traumatic issue for so many people. And we do events in Los Angeles. We have one upcoming in the next year or so. But our New York one is October 22nd. We've been doing them just about every year in either San Francisco, which is where the foundation is based, and in New York City and in Los Angeles. And I've just been very fortunate. Robin Williams has done the benefit 6 times, and Seth Meyers is doing it for the 3rd time in New York City. And we've had so many wonderful people, friends of mine, Craig Ferguson, Sarah Silverman, Jeffrey Ross, Counting Crows, Train, John Mayer. It's just been just pretty much everybody. Ray Romano's done it a couple of times. Just a lot of heart goes into the people that are touched by the cause and touched by the passion for it, because once you lose someone close to something, I didn't know what scleroderma was. I had no clue. And I think a lot of people they still are sclero what, and it's hardening of the skin, and it's so many misconceptions, and yet putting a stamp on it and getting it out there is what these benefits tend to do. There's a bit of a PR push that comes along with it, which is a blessing of it, to put it out there. And in the past, I was in Washington with Sharon Monsky, and Luke and I, whether you know it or not, Luke, we'll plan a trip there.
Yeah, no, we're going to go.
We're going to go, and you put it up in front of the committees. You go to the Capitol and try to get people. Private funding is the only way to move us forward, and that's why getting money from the government is such an impossible thing to do, especially for a disease. And Luke, it's a huge percentage of the people that have this disease are women, pretty much in the prime of their lives, it seems.
Yes, no question about that. Unfortunately, the demographics haven't changed. It's 80% women, and and they typically present between the ages of 35 and 50. I mean, obviously, there are other patients in other ages, but that's the predominant profile.
There's also a huge African American contingency. I'm told that it's a huge percentage. Is that accurate? They're
definitely African Americans are definitely afflicted, and unfortunately for them, they seem to come down with a worse diffuse disease than quote unquote a pure Caucasian Northern European genetic background patient. And actually, we're collaborating with the National Institutes of Health to try to understand that a bit better as we speak. But so that is a correct clinical observation, and we actually, we hope that can actually lead us to something of an understanding, if we could understand what some of the underlying genetic differences are between the African American cohort and the Northern European genetic background cohort. Hopefully that can point us to some suspect genes that really make the disease worse. And by exploiting, that
what is a
understanding,
cohort?
hopefully we can maybe even address the disease for all patients. Sorry, Bob, what was that?
What is a cohort?
Sorry, just a group of patients.
Now, around the world, people are able to hear this and understand it. How do we have any idea how far this carries, this disease, as far as Europe and the rest of the world?
That was the most ignorant question I've ever.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I'm going to go on Rand McNally right now.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that certainly at least the populations that we're most aware of are folks who've got a Northern European or have contributions from a Northern European ancestry, which would include obviously African Americans. And the rates of scleroderma are roughly the same in America and in Europe, and then across the African American population. I think we have very limited data on a African population or an Arab population, to be honest, in terms of demographic information.
And to change the subject a tiny bit here, you're a scientist. You're one of the smartest people that I know. That's just the truth. I also don't know that many people.
Don't know that many scientists. That's okay, Bob. We're going to let you off the hook.
Okay, but in my eyes, you are a genius. What are you most excited about in terms of the research that we are funding right now that gives people hope and promise?
The most promising. Well, I mean, we're funding stuff that I think is very near term. So we are contributing to what I think is the next generation high-dose immunotherapy stem cell protocol, as an example. So as I alluded to in some of my other conversations about the high-dose immunotherapy followed by stem cell rescue, the protocol is evolving. That means to say how much radiation is a good thing, and how much immunosuppression is a good thing, and how much of the cocktail or how much of the drugs that kill immune cells. That all those things are really in the process still of being optimized on two dimensions. One, to make sure that we're giving enough of the stuff that kills the bad cells that we still kill them all, but not so much so that, frankly, we put the patients in danger. And hopefully when we get to the point where it's safe enough that we could actually start to consider treating patients who aren't really quite so sick. Right now, many doctors believe that the risk-benefit is the risk is high enough that the risk-benefit really only is justified in patients who are really very, very sick. One of the objects of the protocol that we're funding is to try to explore, frankly, a less intensive regimen with the idea that hopefully we could treat less sick patients, but patients who are nonetheless declining rapidly, but earlier in their disease. And that might be a particularly opportune moment to intersect the disease and put patients in remission, or maybe even cure them. So that's one element of something that we're doing today that I'm very excited about, and I think could have a very quote unquote near-term readout. As I said, we're talking. Then we've got a variety of things that really are focused on the underlying biology, and I think this may go on the scope of this conversation. In order to do that, and many of our other webinars really address elements of that. So I think I won't repeat myself or repeat our other webinars in short form here. But I'm very excited about some of that work. And then frankly, I'd like to take a moment out and applaud the efforts across the biotech and pharmaceutical community who have really stepped up and I think fairly courageously decided, courageously from a financial standpoint, and putting some of their putting their money and energy at risk to basically trial a variety of different agents. We've got Actelion, who's taken a leadership position. Genentech, MedImmune have all got different agents that are directly testing novel biological therapies, which all I think actually have the opportunity to be much safer than, let's say, this high-dose immunotherapy and with stem cell rescue that we've talked about, much safer than that, and yet have the opportunity to have a potentially profound impact. So I'm super excited about that, and we're working closely with some of those groups to help optimize what they're doing, and certainly are staying very close to the companies and doing whatever we can to help them connect to the right scientists and the right clinicians to optimize those clinical trials.
And Luke, I wanted to ask you, thank you for answering that. so many people ask me this question, and we all, statistics, how many people have it. Kelly Ellison said it's still published that 300,000 are affected in the U.S. Is that accurate? I always feel, before I let you answer it, I always feel that there's more people that have it, because I go places and people, I hear all day long. My mother, my sister has been afflicted. We just got diagnosed, and it seems to be increasing simply because there's more people being diagnosed or able to be diagnosed. But that fact that Kelly brings up, 300,000, what do you make of those statistics?
You know, I think the demographics are always hard to get your hands on, because it's a question of, you know, there's an observation bias. You know, how many patients kind of show up to get treated and are appropriately diagnosed, as well as, you know, what range of severity of symptoms do you, quote unquote, count as scleroderma? You know, and partly that's again an observational bias. But, you know, in terms of the patients who, you know, need to be treated by experts, so they've got, you know, sort of, you know, at least moderate disease or worse, I think, you know, it's sort of in the 100,000 plus range. In terms of patients who've got a wide range of symptoms, which would include scleroderma-like symptoms, it's probably in the 300,000 plus range. And it's a little hard to know sort of where in the spectrum exactly would fall.
For people that don't even
I mean,
know,
I think maybe
we're near the end of this, that don't even know what scleroderma is, that might have been part of this. What do you look, from my knowledge, from what I've learned, it can manifest itself in so many different ways. It can be autoimmune. It can be largely vascular, which is, that is a blood disease, correct? Yeah,
I mean, you're right. There's a bunch of different organ systems that get affected, as certainly the patients know. There's the autoimmune component, which is really probably how the disease starts, and then, you know, the autoimmune sort of driver, if you will, can sometimes seemingly go away, and there's another driver that then becomes much more prominent. And the reason why we say it that way is because anti-immune therapy for many patients just doesn't seem to work. So, and yet their disease continues to progress. So somehow the driver has switched from being autoimmune to a different kind of driver, which our standard anti-immune strategies, you know, can't reach. So that's, I mean, I think what's been sort of the super hard part about addressing the disease as compared to some other, quote unquote, as compared to other autoimmune diseases, which have frankly, you know, yielded to therapies in the last, you know, decade, like rheumatoid arthritis. Not that there's a cure for that, but certainly anti-TNF therapy, as an example, has been a huge advantage, as has stuff like Rituxan, which is anti-B-cell therapy.
Luke, how do you explain, and I've been seeing some notes from different people, is it hereditary and is it environmental? Because I received a note a few moments ago. Someone said their mother had it, their sister had it, and that it, you know, and that would lend people to believe. My sister that I lost, Gay, actually believed that it was environmental. She believed the asbestos in her schoolroom caused it, and there's so many different theories and hearsays.
I think we probably don't. I mean, there's certainly a big environmental component to it, which environment just means stuff that's happened to you over your life, not that there's something that you're breathing every day. The reason why we say that is the genetics don't lead you to it. It's not like you are, quote unquote, born with with scleroderma, or born with a genetics that is going to, you know, give you scleroderma when you're 40. You're born with a predisposition, which makes it a little more likely that you will get it, and then something happens to you across your life, which then leads you to get it, and we just don't understand that. So, hey, Bob, I'm going to just sort of flip it around for the last just a couple of minutes and just talk a bit about maybe some of the things that you're doing again with maybe Facebook and Twitter. And I know you know there's so many people who follow you, and just talk a bit about what you're doing to reach people, because I know we've got folks online who are anxious to understand what we're doing to get the message out.
And I think, frankly, you've taken some leadership inside the foundation about on that dimension. Maybe we should just share that with some of the folks.
I think that'd be very nice. But before you do that, I just wanted to let people know that this is me. That part is me. I just drew that on the screen. And this is you. That's my most exciting telestrating moment of the day. So I'll let you please continue.
You want to talk about some of the tools we're using, Twitter, Facebook, so forth. The things we're trying to do to reach both patients and maybe even clinicians who are listening, if you will, and using those kinds of tools just to inform them and raise awareness and connect them.
Yes, the foundation is very virally astute now and pretty much outputting as much as they can. So it's very easy to go to srfcure.org and you can attach yourself to the Twitter feed and find out about things like this webinar that we're doing and find out about upcoming ones and also find out about the new breakthroughs and studies that are going through. And if you're a patient or you're affected or you know friends or would like to just know more about it because it is such an interesting and yet challenging disease, you can be online at our Twitter page or on our Facebook site, and they are constantly working. We have the people that work for our Scleroderma Research Foundation are doing just a wonderful job at trying to connect with the people and the research component, which is our driving force.
But Bob, do you have any closing comments before I wrap up for us?
I actually do, and I actually wrote it down if I may indulge. I'd just like to ask of everybody today that first thing, my heart goes out. Our heart goes out to everyone affected, and a lot of the books that people have written, many of the things that they're speaking of, the movie I Made for Hope, it's available through our website, srfcure.org, or you can call 1-800-441-CURE. And just as I do metaphorically, it's just a wonderfully passionate and uplifting thing to watch people stand up, not in the comedy sense of the word, but in a unique way for the part of our community and make possible the next steps that will lead to new treatments, because we are moving forward and we are driven. I'm driven for the rest of my life to do this. And whether you sign up for a clinical trial or buy a ticket for a friend to join us at Cool Comedy Hot Cuisine, which can be costly, and we understand that, and we are raising money in the best way we know how, in a concentrated way. Or you can join the Foundation's Crew Cure volunteer program, host a walk, run a bowl-a-thon, a dinner, a movie night, or just send an email or a letter to friends and just raise awareness. And it's always asking for funds, which is never a fun thing to do, but it is what drives us to help find a cure, because everybody can do something. And scleroderma took the life of my dear friend Sharon Monsky and my sister Gay, and a lot of people that I've gotten to meet over the years. I've gone to Johns Hopkins and made two documentary shorts that are available on our website called Moving Forward and Changing Lives, and a couple of the same patients are in them, and we lost a couple of the patients, and that's what drives me forward to help move forward, because if it's affecting someone you love in a personal way, it's really something that people can make a difference and help us fight this disease, scleroderma.
Bob, thanks. And
thank you, Luke.
I want to just, maybe somewhat publicly here, but thank you for your enduring commitment. I think it's, obviously it's close to you, but, when... And
close to you as well.
When folks would have your ability to reach the media and reach people with, really step up and take time to convert some of that publicity power into positive, positive changes. It's particularly meaningful and impressive, and I want to just, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything you're doing for scleroderma patients.
Well, thank you. It's an honor, and it's an honor to work with you on this incredible foundation with all of these wonderful people. And I want to thank all the people that came onto this webinar today, too. It's very, very moving.
And we want to thank the scleroderma community. We're it's a growing community. We're all part of it together, and we need to join together more forcefully to basically pool our resources, pool our energy to be a ever more potent force. With respect to what we can do for you, when you close the webinar window, please provide some information and some feedback for us. There's a really short survey, but it's super helpful in helping us optimize what we deliver to you. Please visit us online at any time, www.sclerodermaresearch.org, or call our offices. It's 1-800-441-CURE. That's 1-800-441-2873. Thanks. Goodbye to everybody.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, everyone.